Let me set the scene. It's a Tuesday. I just got home from work. I smell like coffee, stress, and broken dreams. My feet hurt, my back hurts, my soul hurts. It's that time of year at the office where everything is due at once. Every client is suddenly a priority, and my boss treats the word deadline like it's a personal challenge to my masculinity. I walk through the door, drop my bag, and my wife Julia, who, let me be clear, I love more than anything, is sitting on the couch with her laptop and a look on her face that I can only describe as pre-announcement energy. You know the face. That little sparkle in her eyes that means she's already decided something, and now she's just going to tell me about it. "Hey babe," she says, casually closing the laptop. "So, I've been thinking." 3 words. 3 words that have never once in the history of marriage led to a relaxing evening. "I want to take a little trip," she says. "Just a week. Somewhere by the coast. You know, to decompress." I blink. "A trip?" "Yeah. A week-long trip." I sit down slowly, the way a man sits when he's trying to process information without immediately saying something stupid. "When were you planning to mention this?" I ask. She shrugs. "I'm mentioning it now." "Right. Now." After she's already looked up hotels, probably already packed half her brain, and already decided the answer is yes. I try the reasonable husband approach. "Could we maybe go together? Because I could use a vacation too, and I kind of want to do this alone, Eric." I pause. "Alone?" "Yeah, just to breathe a little, you know, clear my head." Now look, I'm not a suspicious man by nature. I am, however, a man who just got home after 11 hours of work to find out his wife is planning a solo vacation she didn't mention until this exact moment. So you'll understand if my brain started doing some light jogging in a direction I wasn't thrilled about. "Clear your head," I repeat. "From what exactly?" She gives me the look that says, "Don't make this weird." "From everything," she says gently. "I just need some space. It's not a big deal. I want to be a cool husband. I genuinely do. But there's something about the phrase, 'I just need some space,' that physically cannot sound casual, no matter how it's delivered. That sentence could be whispered by a golden retriever, and it would still feel like a warning. I try one more time. "I mean, even if I can't take the full week, maybe I could join for a few days." And that's when she said it. She smiled at me, warm, sweet, and completely final, and said, "I'm going alone. And no, you're not invited." Silence. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of my dignity leaving the room. I nodded, very slowly, like a man who is absolutely fine and definitely not replaying that sentence 17 times. "Cool," I said. "Cool," she agreed. 2 days later, Julia bought 3 new outfits, packed a full suitcase, and left on a Friday afternoon, looking like she was heading to the best week of her life. And she was happy. Like, genuinely, glowing, slightly too excited happy. She kissed me goodbye, told me she loved me, said she'd text, and practically skipped to the car. I stood in the doorway like a golden retriever who just watched his owner drive away. I closed the door. I sat on the couch. The house was very quiet. I told myself I was fine. I had work. I had food. I had a TV. I was a grown adult man who did not need to spiral. I lasted about 4 hours. By 8 p.m. I was sitting in the dark, eating cereal for dinner, staring at the wall, and going through our last 2 months of conversations trying to figure out if I'd missed something. And then, bang, bang, bang. Someone knocked on the front door like they were personally offended by it. I opened the door, and there, on my porch, looking like a man whose entire emotional support system had just packed a suitcase and left, was James, my father-in-law. 54 years old, a little disheveled, holding a 6-pack of beer, with the face of a man who had absolutely nowhere else to go. We stared at each other for a second. "Hey," he said. "Hey," I said. He held up the beer slightly. I stepped aside and let him in. James walked in like he owned the place, which, to be fair, is just how James walks everywhere. The man has never entered a room quietly in his life. He set the six-pack on the coffee table, dropped onto the couch with a grunt, and looked around the living room the way a detective looks at a crime scene. "Where's Julia?" he asked. "She's gone," I said, sitting down across from him. He raised an eyebrow. "Gone where?" "Vacation. Said she needed space. Packed a bag, bought new clothes, left Friday afternoon looking like she was going to a music festival." James stared at me. Then he slowly reached forward, grabbed a beer, cracked it open, and took a very long sip. "Huh?" he said. "Yeah." Another sip. "Linda left too," he said quietly. I blinked. "What?" "We had a fight." He waved his hand vaguely, the universal gesture for it was bad, but I don't want to get into it right now. "She said she needed space, said she wanted to go somewhere and just breathe." I stared at him. He stared at me. The refrigerator hummed. "James. Eric. Did they go to the same place?" The silence that followed was the kind that changes the energy of an entire room. We didn't say anything for a good 10 seconds. We just sat there, two men slowly doing math in our heads, and the math was not adding up to anything comfortable. "Julia didn't tell you where she was going?" he asked. "She said the coast. That's it." "Linda said something about a beach resort." He paused. "Didn't give me a name." We looked at each other again. "They went together," I said. "They went together," he confirmed. And just like that, the evening shifted gears completely. Here's the thing about James. He's a good man. Genuinely. He's loud, he's emotional, he cries at car commercials, and then immediately denies it, and he has the impulse control of a golden retriever near a squirrel. But underneath all that, he's decent, he's loyal, and he loves his family more than anything. He's also, and I say this with full respect, absolutely terrible at handling uncertainty. So when we started talking, really talking, somewhere around beer number 2, things got real very fast. "She bought new clothes before she left," James said, pointing at me like this was evidence in a trial. "Julia bought new clothes too," I said. "Linda got her hair done." "Julia shaved her legs." We both went quiet after that one. "She always shaves her legs," I added quickly. "Sure," said James, in the tone of a man who was not sure at all. "Now I want to be honest here. In the daylight, with a clear head, I know that women buy new clothes for vacations. They get their hair done, they shave their legs. These are normal human behaviors. I am aware of this. But it was 9 p.m. I was tired. I was already feeling some kind of way about the whole "you're not invited" speech. And now I had my father-in-law sitting across from me, matching my energy and then raising it. And together we were doing what lonely, slightly insecure men do best. We started connecting dots that weren't connected. "You know what I think?" James said, leaning forward. He had the look of a man about to say something he'd been holding in for hours. "I think they planned this. I mean, obviously they planned it. They packed bags." No, no, no." He shook his head. "I mean, I think there's more to it. Why all the secrecy? Why didn't they just say we're going together?" "Maybe Linda didn't want you to know she talked to Julia about the fight." "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe." He let that second maybe hang in the air like cigarette smoke. "James, I'm just saying." "Say it normally then." He took another sip of beer. "What if they met someone?" And there it was. The thing neither of us had said out loud yet. The thought that had been sitting in the corner of the room since he walked in, waiting for enough beer and enough silence to finally speak up. I should have shut it down. I should have said, "James, our wives are adults. They're allowed to take vacations. This is not a thriller." Instead, I said, "They did both seem really happy about going." James pointed at me again. "Exactly." And that was it. That was the moment we completely lost the plot. What followed was, in hindsight, one of the most unhinged 2-hour conversations of my adult life. We went through everything. Every small argument, every weird moment, every time one of them checked their phone and smiled at something they didn't explain. James brought up a dinner 3 weeks ago where Linda laughed too hard at something on TV. I brought up a time Julia said a guy at her office was actually really funny and then immediately changed the subject. Were these things suspicious? No. Were we treating them like classified intelligence? Absolutely. By 11 p.m. we had finished the six-pack, started on the wine I had in the kitchen, and built a conspiracy theory that would have impressed a college film student. You know what the worst part is? James said, staring at the ceiling. I don't even know where they are. I don't know the hotel. I don't know the town. Nothing. Me neither, I said. And then something shifted in James's eyes. A very specific kind of shift. The kind that happens when a man stops feeling sorry for himself and starts feeling determined. I should have been worried about that shift. I was not. I might know how to find out, he said slowly. How? He looked almost embarrassed. I have access to Linda's email. I stared at him. She gave me the password years ago, he said, holding up both hands. For emergencies. And this is an emergency? He looked at me like I had just asked if water was wet. 20 minutes later, James had his phone out, scrolling through Linda's inbox with the focus of a man defusing a bomb. He kept muttering to himself, clicking through promotional emails and calendar invites until suddenly he froze. Got it, he whispered. What? He turned the phone around. Hotel booking confirmation, full address, coastal resort, check-in date matching exactly when Linda left. We stared at it. Then we stared at each other. We're going, James said. And here's where I should tell you that I paused, that I thought about it rationally, that I said, James, we are grown men, we have jobs, we have responsibilities, we should simply call our wives and have an honest conversation. Instead, what I said was, I'll get my keys. The next morning we moved fast. I sent my boss a text, not a call, a text. It said, family emergency, won't be in for a few days. I turned my phone face down and did not look at it again. The several follow-up calls he made after that? Ignored. The messages? Unread. Was this professionally irresponsible? Yes. Did I care in that moment? Not even slightly. James, meanwhile, was operating on a completely different level of commitment. He came back to my house at 9 a.m. with 2 plastic bags from a party supply store and a look on his face like he'd just come up with the greatest plan in human history. What's in the bags? I asked. He pulled out 2 cheap wigs, one dirty blonde, one dark brown, then fake mustaches, stick-on beards, a pair of sunglasses so large they belonged on a celebrity avoiding the paparazzi, not a 54-year-old man from the suburbs. I looked at the disguises, then at him, then back at the disguises. James, we can't let them recognize us. We look like we're going to a Halloween party. We look like different people, he said firmly, holding up the blonde wig with complete confidence. Reader, we did not look like different people. We looked like 2 men who had made several bad decisions that morning and were about to make several more. But we put them on anyway. The drive down was, genuinely, a lot of fun. And I hate that I'm admitting that. We had the windows down. James controlled the music, which meant a lot of classic rock and exactly one Fleetwood Mac song that he claimed came on randomly, and he definitely did not search for. We stopped for gas station sandwiches that were aggressively mediocre and somehow deeply satisfying. We did impressions of our wives. We made each other laugh until James almost missed an exit. For a few hours, it felt less like a paranoid surveillance mission and more like a road trip with a friend. A weird, slightly unhinged friend who was wearing a dirty blonde wig and had a fake mustache slightly crooked above his lip, but still, a friend. You know, James said somewhere around hour 3, when I married Linda, I told myself I'd never be one of those jealous guys. Me too, I said. Look at us. Don't look at us. He laughed. I laughed. We drove. We pulled into the hotel parking lot at around 4 in the afternoon. It was a nice place, right on the coast. White walls, terracotta roof, palm trees, the whole resort fantasy. The kind of place that costs enough to make you wince, but not enough to make you leave. We walked into the lobby with our sunglasses on, wigs in place, fake facial hair applied with the kind of confidence that only comes from having zero self-awareness left. The woman at the front desk looked up, smiled professionally, looked at us a little longer. "Welcome," she said carefully. "Do you have a reservation?" "We'd like a room," James said. "Certainly. How many rooms?" James looked at me. I looked at James. Here's the thing. We hadn't actually discussed this part. In all the planning, the wig buying, the road trip snacks, neither of us had thought to book ahead. And apparently it was peak season, because when the receptionist checked her screen, her expression did the thing where it stays polite but gets slightly apologetic. "We only have one room available," she said. "A double queen." "We'll take it," James said immediately. She typed something, then looked up at us again with an expression I can only describe as professionally neutral, but internally delighted. "And will this be for the two of you?" she asked, with a very specific kind of smile. "We're not," I started. "We're family," James said. The smile got slightly wider. "Of course. Enjoy your stay." As we walked away from the desk, I could hear two other staff members at the far end of the counter murmur something to each other. One of them laughed quietly. James leaned toward me. "Do they think we're a couple?" "James, we should clarify." James let it go. He straightened up, adjusted his wig, walked toward the elevator with tremendous dignity. "I just want the record to show," he said quietly as the doors closed, "that I have been happily married for many years." "The record shows it, James." "Good." The elevator hummed upward. Somewhere in this hotel, our wives were probably sitting by the pool, completely relaxed, totally unbothered. They had no idea what was coming. Neither, honestly, did we. It's a beautiful Saturday afternoon at a coastal resort. The sun is doing everything a sun is supposed to do. The pool is sparkling. Somewhere a steel drum is playing something that technically counts as music. Families are laughing, couples are holding hands, a child is eating an ice cream cone with the pure focused joy of someone who has never paid a bill in their life. And crouched behind a decorative hedge near the pool entrance, sweating through their shirts, wearing fake facial hair in 80-degree heat, are two grown adult men pretending to read folded hotel brochures while scanning the area like they're the world's worst CIA operatives. That was us. That was me and James. I'd like to say we had a plan. We did not have a plan. We had vibes and paranoia and a combined total of maybe 4 hours of sleep, and somehow we thought that was enough to run a covert surveillance operation at a beach resort. "Do you see them?" James whispered, craning his neck around the left side of the bush. "Not yet," I whispered back. "Stop whispering. You're whispering. Because you started whispering. Keep looking." The hedge was not as large as it had appeared from across the pool deck. Up close, it was more of a decorative accent than actual cover. A toddler walked past, stopped, stared directly at us, and then kept walking without saying anything. I choose to believe she was simply a very chill toddler, and not that we were so obviously weird she didn't even know where to begin. Then James grabbed my arm. "There," he said. And there they were, Julia and Linda, stretched out on side-by-side lounge chairs near the far end of the pool, sunglasses on, drinks in hand, looking like two women who had absolutely nothing to worry about in the entire world. Julia was wearing a new sundress. Linda had a hat I'd never seen before. They were talking and laughing and looked genuinely like they were having the best time of their lives, which was, depending on your perspective, either wonderful or deeply suspicious. I felt two things simultaneously. The first was a warm, involuntary rush of affection, because my wife looked happy and beautiful and relaxed. The second was an immediate paranoid override of that feeling, because why was she so happy, and who was she talking to, and why did she need new clothes to just sit by a pool with her mother? James was already narrating. "Okay," he whispered. They look relaxed. They do. Too relaxed? James, people relax on vacation. I know that. I'm just noting the degree of relaxation. I looked at him. What does that mean? He squinted thoughtfully at the pool. Linda hasn't looked that relaxed at home in 4 years. I didn't have a response to that, so I just turned back to the hedge. For the first 20 minutes, nothing happened. Julia and Linda drank their drinks. They talked. They laughed at something on Linda's phone. They reapplied sunscreen. At one point, Linda closed her eyes and just tilted her face up toward the sun, and James made a small sound beside me that I can only describe as complicated. "She looks good," he said quietly. "She does," I agreed. "Don't agree with me." "Sorry." We repositioned twice because a pool attendant kept walking our route and giving us looks that were moving rapidly from curious to concerned. The second time we moved, we ended up slightly closer to the pool, crouching behind a much smaller plant that I think was purely ornamental. "This isn't enough coverage," I said. "It's fine." "James, I can see my own knees." "Stop looking at your knees. Look at your wife." And then everything changed. He came from the direction of the bar. Tall, maybe 25. The kind of tan you only get if you either work outside or were specifically designed to stand near swimming pools. He was wearing a white linen shirt with the top 2 buttons open, which is a thing I have never once pulled off, and apparently he did, effortlessly. He walked like someone who'd never had a bad day, which is its own kind of offensive quality. He walked straight toward Julia and Linda's chairs, said something. Julia looked up and immediately laughed. Not a polite laugh, a real one, the kind that involves leaning back slightly. Beside me, James went completely still. "Who is that?" he said. Not a question. A statement. The statement of a man who has already decided he doesn't like the answer. "I don't know." "He's talking to them." "I can see that." James slowly lowered his sunglasses. He looked over the top of them at the stranger with the expression of a man watching a natural disaster begin. "Eric, I see him. He's handsome." "James, he's too handsome." I didn't argue because he was objectively correct, and arguing would have required energy I didn't have. The man sat down in the empty lounge chair beside them, casual as anything, like he'd been invited. And within 60 seconds, they were all 3 of them talking like old friends. Linda was smiling. Julia was gesturing with her hands the way she does when she's genuinely engaged in a conversation. And then Julia laughed again, and in doing so, lightly touched the man's arm for approximately 1 second. 1 second. James made a sound like a man who had just stepped on a Lego with his soul. "Did you see that?" "Keep your voice down." "She touched his arm, Eric." "I know." "She touched his arm." "I know she touched his arm, James." A woman 2 lounge chairs over looked up from her book. We both immediately pretended to study our hotel brochures with intense academic focus. After a moment, I looked back up. The man was still there, still talking, still existing with infuriating confidence. Then he took out his phone. He held the screen toward Julia first, then Linda, tapping something quickly. Then both women reached for their own phones. The air beside me became very heavy. "He's giving them his number," James whispered. His voice had dropped to the register of a man narrating his own worst nightmare. "Maybe it's something else," I said. "Maybe he's showing them a photo, or he's giving them his number, Eric." "Okay, but maybe it's Instagram." James turned to look at me with complete seriousness. "Instagram," he said, "is worse." I thought about it. He wasn't entirely wrong. I made a decision. I'm going to be honest with you. It was not a good decision. But in the moment, it felt logical, which is how all terrible decisions feel when you're tired and slightly unhinged and crouching behind a decorative plant. "I'm going to follow him," I said. James stared at me. "Follow him where?" "Wherever he goes. I want to know who he is." "And I just stay here?" "Yes. Watch them. Don't do anything." James straightened slightly. "I won't do anything." "James." "I said I won't do anything, Eric." Those were the 6 most dangerous words he'd said all day. But I was already moving. Following someone covertly at a resort is harder than it sounds, mostly because resorts are designed to be open and pleasant and visible, which are the exact opposite of good surveillance conditions. I trailed the man at a distance of about 30 feet, pretending to look at my phone, which I realize now probably made me look more suspicious, because I kept walking into things. I followed him past the bar, past the towel station, around the side of the main building, and then I heard him talking to another hotel employee near a service cart, and I stopped behind a column and listened. "Getting slammed today, so we're giving guests the direct line for poolside orders," he was saying, handing over a small card. "Cocktails, food, whatever. Saves them having to flag someone down." The other employee nodded. "You hand those out to everyone?" "Started this morning, short-staffed all weekend." I stood behind that column for a moment. The man was a waiter. He was a hotel waiter. The number was a room service order line. The beautiful tanned man with the open linen shirt was an employee handing out contact cards for poolside food delivery. I stood very still and processed this information. Then I thought about James. James, who I had left alone with the specific instruction to not do anything, next to his wife and a man he believed was giving her his personal phone number. James, who had the impulse control of a golden retriever near a squirrel. James, who had said "I won't do anything" in that very specific tone that retrospectively sounded a lot less like a promise and a lot more like a warning. I turned around and started walking fast. I was too late by about 45 seconds. Here's what I pieced together afterward from what I saw and what James eventually admitted. After I left, James had apparently sat behind the hedge for approximately 3 minutes before deciding that watching a handsome man sit next to his wife was an active emergency requiring immediate physical intervention. His plan, such as it was, involved casually walking by, close enough to make his presence known without being recognized. The waiter, by terrible coincidence, had looped back around and was now crossing the pool deck, carrying a full tray of cocktails. James timed his casual walk to intersect with this path. What happened next was something I had the misfortune of witnessing in real time from about 20 feet away as I came around the corner. James moved with the energy of a man who had convinced himself he was being subtle. He was not being subtle. He was walking with the stiff, deliberate stiffness of someone performing normalcy, which is the least normal thing you can do. His arms were wrong. His posture was wrong. His expression was wrong in a way that I cannot fully describe, but that I would call aggressively innocent. He got within 4 feet of the waiter. Then his flip-flop, his own flip-flop, worn on his own foot, a shoe he had put on himself that morning, somehow caught on the edge of a pool tile. James stumbled. He reached out for something to catch himself. The something he reached for was the waiter. The waiter, carrying a full tray of drinks, had no chance. It happened in what felt like slow motion, but was probably less than 2 seconds. James's full weight made contact. The tray went up. The waiter went sideways. And then, with a splash that I am fairly confident was heard in the neighboring zip code, the waiter went directly into the pool. Cocktails rained down. Someone screamed. A child started clapping, because children have no understanding of consequences. A lifeguard whistle went off somewhere, and James, standing at the edge of the pool with wet shoes and the wide-eyed expression of a man who had surprised even himself, straightened up very slowly and looked at the scene he had created. Then, in a voice that was quiet and completely serious, he said, "Target neutralized." I stood 10 feet away and felt my soul briefly leave my body. "Are you insane?" I grabbed James by the elbow and started moving us away from the pool at a speed that was technically still walking, but only barely. I thought, "He's an employee." "What?" "He works here, James." James went pale. The kind of pale that happens when something bypasses embarrassment entirely and goes straight to horror. "The number he gave them," I said, pulling him behind a palm tree, "was a room service line for ordering drinks to the pool, because they're short-staffed." James stared at me. "Oh," he said. "Yeah, Oh God. Yeah. You pushed a waiter into a pool. I thought I was protecting your family. I know. You pushed a waiter into a pool, James. He looked back toward the chaos we had left behind. Hotel staff were helping the soaking wet young man out of the pool. Someone had brought towels. A manager was already on scene looking at the surrounding area with the expression of someone who very much wanted to find whoever had caused this. Beside the pool, Julia and Linda had turned toward the commotion. They watched the scene with mild confusion for a moment, then turned back to each other, apparently deciding it wasn't their concern. They had not seen us. By some miracle, they had not seen us. I exhaled. We spent the next 10 minutes moving around the resort perimeter like two men who were absolutely definitely not responsible for anything that had just happened, which meant we looked exactly like two men who were absolutely definitely responsible for something that had just happened. James was doing the thing where he replays an event in real time and cannot stop talking about it. I genuinely thought I was helping. I know. The way he was sitting there. I know, James. In that shirt. I know about the shirt. How was I supposed to know he worked here? You could have not pushed him into a pool. He went quiet for a second. That's fair. The problem, beyond the obvious problem of the waiter incident, was that we had now attracted attention. Not loud, dramatic attention. Worse, quiet, watchful, professional attention. The kind hotels employ specifically to notice when guests are doing things they shouldn't be doing. A security guard near the bar area had looked at us twice in the last 5 minutes. A housekeeper pushing a cart had done a small double take at James's wig, which had shifted slightly during the incident and was now sitting at an angle that suggested either fashion statement or catastrophic personal decision. We were, without question, on someone's radar. And we had, at this point, been at the hotel for roughly 3 hours. I looked at James. James looked at me. I think, I said carefully, we need to be more careful. James adjusted his wig with great dignity. Agreed, he said. We were not going to be more careful, but we didn't know that yet. I want to be clear about something. By day 2, we had a system. The system was bad, but it was ours. James handled binoculars. I handled logistics, which mostly meant making sure James didn't do anything that required a legal defense. We ate room service in shifts. We barely slept, and somewhere between the paranoia and the exhaustion, we had fully committed to the bit, which is how I ended up on a balcony at 9 p.m. with a pair of binoculars, watching my wife receive a text message from across a courtyard like some kind of discount private investigator. Julia was sitting on her balcony, phone in hand. She read something, then immediately turned the screen toward Linda, who was leaning in the doorway. Both of them lit up at the same time, that unmistakable energy shift when plans suddenly materialize. 20 minutes later, they walked out of the hotel, looking like they were going somewhere that absolutely required good outfits and lipstick. James appeared at my shoulder. Where are they going? No idea. It's 9 p.m. I know what time it is, James. He grabbed his black hoodie off the bed. We're following them. Now, and I want the record to reflect this, I did pause. For maybe 4 seconds. I looked at the hoodie. I looked at James. I thought about the waiter in the pool. I thought about my unanswered work messages. I thought about every reasonable adult choice I could make in this moment. Then I grabbed my black hoodie too. We followed them to a beach party about a quarter-mile down the coast. And I mean party. Open bar, neon lights strung between palm trees, a DJ playing something with too much bass, 200 people dancing in the sand. The kind of event that looked effortlessly fun if you were attending it normally, and like an absolute surveillance nightmare if you were trying to covertly monitor 2 specific women inside it. There was a guy at the entrance checking tickets. We had no tickets. James looked at me. I looked at the entrance. There was a brief moment where a large group came through and the bouncer got distracted checking a phone. Now, James said. We walked through like we owned the place. Shoulders back, eyes forward, completely calm. We made it maybe 30 feet before I looked back and saw the bouncer notice the gap in his count and start scanning the crowd. He saw us, I said. Don't run, said James. I know don't run. Walk normal. I am walking normal. You're walking like someone who just snuck into a party. Because I did. We disappeared into the crowd. Inside was chaos in the best and worst way. The best way? Julia and Linda were easy to spot because Linda's hat was visible above most of the crowd. The worst way? Everything else. We lost each other within 4 minutes. I spent a full 5 minutes thinking I was following James through the crowd before the person turned around, and it was a completely different bald man who looked nothing like James and who gave me a look that said, "Why are you following me?" I found James crouched behind a large decorative anchor near the bar, watching Julia and Linda from about 40 feet away. They were drinking, talking, dancing together briefly, laughing. No men around them, nothing remotely suspicious. Just two women enjoying a beach party like normal human beings. They're fine, I said. So far, said James. James, they're literally just dancing. I know, I'm watching. We watched. They were fine. Then James's phone flashlight turned on. Not intentionally. He was checking the time, fumbled the screen, and suddenly his face was fully illuminated from below, like a Halloween decoration at maximum brightness. Right there in the middle of a dark beach party. He froze. I froze. 3 people nearby turned to look. James slowly lowered the phone. In doing so, he knocked my plastic cup out of my hand. The cup hit the person standing next to me directly in the side. Cold soda. White shirt. The man turned around with an expression that moved very quickly from surprise to annoyed. Sorry, I'm so sorry. He was already walking away unhappily. But the damage was done. We had now become the 2 weird guys near the anchor, and several people were looking at us with the particular suspicion reserved for people who are clearly at a party for reasons that have nothing to do with the party. Then I saw the bouncer. He had come inside, and he was moving through the crowd in a way that was slow and deliberate and very specifically aimed at our general direction. We need to leave, I said. Where? I looked left, right. The main entrance was where the bouncer was coming from. The beach was open but well lit near the waterline. To our right was a low wooden fence separating the party from the adjacent beach. Over the fence, I said. I'm 54. James, the fence is 3 feet tall. He looked at it. Fine. We went over the fence. What we did not do was look at what was on the other side of the fence. What was on the other side of the fence was a wedding. Not a full wedding. The tail end of one. The reception was clearly winding down, guests drifting toward the parking area, but the couple was still there doing a final photo session near a white arch decorated with string lights and flowers, set up beautifully right there in the sand. The photographer was kneeling. The couple was posed. Everything was perfect. James landed first. His foot immediately caught the extension cord running to the arch lights. I watched it happen with the specific helplessness of someone watching a glass fall off a table. You see it, you know what's coming, and there is absolutely nothing you can do. James grabbed the arch trying to catch himself. The arch leaned. Then it kept leaning. Then it fell completely, slowly and dramatically, directly into the sand, taking the string lights with it and plunging that section of the beach into darkness. The photographer made a sound I cannot reproduce in text. Several guests turned around. The bride said something that I'm fairly certain wasn't in her vows. Run! I grabbed James by the arm and we went. Full sprint. Down the beach. Sand flying. James's wig partially lifting in the wind. Neither of us looking back until we cleared the lights of the resort and made it to the dark stretch of beach on the other side. Behind us, some voices, footsteps in sand, then nothing. The darkness and the crowd behind us swallowed the pursuit. We ran until we hit the wall of the hotel's back service entrance and stopped. Both of us, hands on knees, completely out of breath. Sand everywhere. James's fake mustache was hanging off one side of his face. We stayed behind the trash containers for 10 full minutes without speaking. Finally, James straightened up, looked at me with the exhausted eyes of a man who had genuinely surprised himself tonight, and said, "I think we made things worse." I stared at him. "There is no think anymore, James." I leaned back against the wall. "We are officially criminals." He peeled the mustache off his face and looked at it. "The waiter was bad," he said quietly. "The arch was worse." "The arch was significantly worse, yes." Silence. "Do you think they got the shot?" he asked. "Before the arch fell?" I turned to look at him. "The couple," he said. "Do you think the photographer got the good ones first?" I had no words. I genuinely had no words. We went upstairs, ordered 2 whiskeys from room service, and did not speak for a long time. By day 3, we had seen nothing. Not one single thing that justified any of this. Julia and Linda were drinking cocktails, walking on the beach, sleeping in, and living their best lives. No suspicious men, no secret meetings, nothing. And somehow, that made us more paranoid. Because surely, if nothing had happened yet, something was about to happen. That's the logic you develop when you haven't slept properly in 3 days, and your surveillance career has so far produced a hospitalized waiter and a destroyed wedding arch. James had started rating every man within 50 feet of our wives on a threat scale of 1 to 10. A shirtless guy jogging past the pool got a 6. A hotel manager who said good morning to Linda got an 8. A 70-year-old man reading a newspaper nearby got a 4. Just in case. "James," I said, "he's reading the newspaper." "Fit for his age," said James, not lowering the binoculars. That evening at the pool bar, everything changed. 2 men sat down next to Julia and Linda. And these guys were loud, big energy, interrupting each other, laughing at their own jokes, arguing about cocktail ingredients with the passion of people who had been arguing about cocktail ingredients their entire lives. Within 5 minutes, they were deep in conversation with our wives like they'd known each other for years. James lowered the binoculars slowly. "Eric, I see them. They're very confident. I see that too." Julia was laughing. Linda was leaning forward the way she does when she's genuinely interested in a conversation. The 2 men, Mark and Daniel, we'd later learn, were gesturing wildly, completely comfortable, completely at ease. "They're too comfortable," James said. "People are allowed to be comfortable." "Not that comfortable." We watched. My jaw was tight. James had stopped blinking, which was starting to concern me medically. Then Julia said something, and one of the men, Mark, nodded and pointed upward, toward the hotel. Julia looked at Linda. Linda nodded, and then all 4 of them stood up and walked inside together, toward the elevators. James grabbed my arm hard enough to leave a mark. "They're going upstairs," he whispered. "I see it." "Eric, I said I see it." We watched the elevator doors close. 30 seconds of silence. "We need proof," I said. "Here's the thing about the plan we came up with. There was no part of it that was good. We went outside, looked up at the building, and tried to identify which balcony belonged to Mark and Daniel's room, based entirely on vibes and a brief argument about which window had the right curtain color. "Second floor, 4th from the left," James said. "That's a guess. It's an educated guess. You've never educated a guess in your life. 4th from the left, Eric." We found a drain pipe, some decorative stone ledges, a series of architectural features that were clearly designed to look good and absolutely not intended to support 2 grown men climbing them at 10 p.m. We climbed them anyway. It was slow and it was ugly, and at one point James stopped moving entirely for 30 seconds, and when I asked what was wrong, he just said, "Cramp," in a very small voice, and I had to wait. We made it to the 2nd floor, found a balcony, pulled ourselves over the railing. James immediately stepped wrong. His sandal went sideways, caught in the gap between the metal railing bars, and locked there like it had been welded in. "Don't panic," I whispered. "I am panicking." Keep your voice. The balcony door opened. The man standing there was approximately 70 years old, Texas built, wearing a sleeveless shirt and the expression of someone who had seen a lot in his life and was not impressed by any of it. He looked at me. He looked at James, who was stuck to his railing by one foot. He looked back at me. Complete silence. Then he turned his head back inside. "Martha," he said calmly, "call security." Sir, this is a misunderstanding." I started. Then I saw the pepper spray. It was not a small pepper spray. It was the kind of pepper spray that suggested this man had been waiting his entire retirement for exactly this situation. He deployed it without hesitation. I caught it directly in the face. The world became fire. I went down immediately, hitting the balcony floor, completely blind, making sounds that I hope never to make again in my life. James, still attached to the railing, started screaming and yanking his foot in pure panic. Somehow, through adrenaline or desperation or divine intervention, the sandal released. He fell sideways onto the balcony next to me. We were both on the floor. James was yelling. I was coughing. The old man was still spraying, apparently committed to thoroughness. Lights came on in neighboring windows. Someone shouted from below. A door opened somewhere down the hall. Then I heard the voice I had been both desperately wanting to hear and deeply dreading for 3 days. "What is going on out?" Footsteps. Then silence. Then, "Eric?" I could not see. My eyes were producing tears faster than seemed medically possible. Through the blur, I could make out Julia standing in the hallway entrance to the balcony next to ours, staring at the scene in front of her. Me, on the floor, fake mustache completely dissolved by pepper spray, leaving a faint drawn-on smear across my upper lip. James, one sandal on, one sandal somewhere on the balcony, also on the floor, also crying from the spray. The Texan, still holding the canister, looking fully justified. Several hotel guests watching from their own balconies. Linda appeared behind Julia. She looked at James on the floor. She took a very long, slow breath. "James," she said, "what the hell is wrong with you?" The security team arrived 40 seconds later. They helped us up. James tried to explain that he wasn't a criminal while having no shoes, red eyes, and a wig that had rotated roughly 90 degrees during the fall, so it was now essentially a side part. As they walked us down the hall, Julia pulled up beside me and said very quietly, "How long have you been here?" James and I answered at the same time, mid-cough. 3 days. Julia closed her eyes briefly. "And the balcony," she said. "Why were you on that balcony?" I coughed. "We saw you go upstairs with those men and we thought—" "Eric." Her voice was extremely controlled. "Mark and Daniel are not quite what you thought. They've been together for 6 years. I needed Wi-Fi for a work thing and they offered their room because ours barely gets signal." Silence. "Their room has a projector," Linda added flatly, looking at James. James made a very quiet sound. "We just watched a presentation about their road trip," Julia said, "with a cheese board." I stared straight ahead as security walked us down the corridor. "A cheese board," I repeated. "A very nice one," said Linda. James said nothing. He was looking at his one bare foot with the expression of a man reviewing every decision that led him to this moment. There were many decisions to review. The security office was a small room with 2 chairs, fluorescent lighting, and absolutely nowhere to hide from your own mistakes. James and I sat there looking like we'd lost a fight with a weather system. Security asked questions. James lasted about 90 seconds before he completely fell apart. "We're not criminals," he said, hands up. We're idiots. We're 2 genuinely idiotic men who got scared and made a series of increasingly terrible decisions." And then he told them everything. The beer, the conspiracy theories, the wigs, the road trip, the waiter, the wedding arch, the balcony, all of it, in full detail, with hand gestures. Somewhere around the wedding arch part, one of the security guys pressed his lips together very hard and looked at the ceiling. The manager asked, in a carefully neutral voice, Sir, you're aware you pushed an employee into the pool? James deflated. Yes. And the wedding arch? That was an accident. And the balcony? Also an accident. How is a balcony an accident? James had no answer for that. I jumped in and explained my part. That I'd abandoned my job mid-season, driven across the state, worn a fake beard in 80-degree heat, and ended up pepper-sprayed on a stranger's balcony, all because I was scared of a distance I felt growing between me and my wife, and didn't know how to just say that. Julia and Linda were also in this room and listened to our excuses. Julia was quiet for a moment after that. Then Linda spoke. She explained the whole thing simply and without drama. She and James had a bad fight. She needed to cool down and didn't want to do it alone. She called Julia. Julia came, without telling Eric, because she didn't want to drag him into her parents' argument, and because she knew he couldn't leave work anyway. That was it. That was the entire mystery. 2 women went on vacation. One to recover from a fight, one to support her mom. No conspiracy, no secrets, no catastrophe. Just a normal, human, completely unremarkable situation that 2 men had turned into an international incident. Mark leaned toward Daniel and whispered something. Daniel covered his mouth. Neither of them succeeded in not laughing. The manager pinched the bridge of his nose. Then my phone buzzed. I glanced down out of reflex. A message from my boss, which I realized I had not read in 3 days. I opened it. I read it. I read it again. I got fired, I said. Room went quiet. James slowly turned to look at me. We destroyed your career, he said softly, to protect a marriage that was never in danger. 4 seconds of silence. Then Julia started laughing. Not politely, genuinely, fully, can't stop laughing. The kind that takes over your whole body. Linda followed immediately, then Mark and Daniel, then one of the security guys who had been holding it together heroically until this exact moment. James looked at me. I looked at James. And then I started laughing too, because what else do you do? The whole thing was so completely, perfectly absurd that there was nothing left to do but laugh at it. We sorted out the damage. Julia and Linda handled the hotel manager directly, compensated for the wedding arch, and personally tipped the waiter James had launched into the pool. He was surprisingly gracious about it. James shook his hand for longer than necessary. The old Texan accepted an apology in the hallway. He kept the pepper spray out during the conversation, which was fair. That night, all 4 of us sat on the beach. No binoculars, no wigs, no surveillance positions, just 4 people and the ocean and the specific exhausted peace that comes after everything has gone wrong and somehow resolved anyway. James and Linda talked, really talked, the way they apparently hadn't in a while. I could hear their voices but not the words, which was exactly right. Julia sat next to me, close enough that our shoulders touched. I should have told you where I was going, she said. I should have just asked you instead of... I gestured vaguely at the general concept of the last 3 days. Building an entire spy operation? I was going to say overreacting, but yes. She leaned her head on my shoulder. You were scared. I was terrified, I said. Not of you cheating, just of us, getting further apart without me noticing until it was too late. She was quiet for a moment. Next time say that. Yeah, I said. I will. We sat there for a while. The waves came in. The waves went out. I'm unemployed, I said eventually. I know. Like, starting tomorrow. Eric. Yeah? Shut up and watch the ocean. I watched the ocean. Behind us, James had somehow found the old Texan again and was attempting, with great passion and 0 success, to explain that he hadn't looked like a burglar. The Texan was not convinced. Linda was laughing. I sighed, leaned back in the sand, and stared up at the sky. Julia kissed me on the cheek. Next time, she said quietly, just ask questions like a normal husband. Next time, I said, invite me. She smiled. From somewhere behind us, James's voice carried across the beach. Sir, I had a very legitimate reason for being on that balcony. The Texan said something we couldn't hear. That is completely different. Linda. James, stop. Julia and I looked at each other, and we laughed until the ocean drowned it out.